Serious, people who have survived a murder attempt, by dumb luck, what's your story? U/ThrillhouseMax responded. Thank God for my nosy neighbors. I always used to hate how nosy they were. Until this happened. When I was about 10 I was riding my bike outside. My parents always let me ride my bike outside during the summer, but only up and down the street we were on. One day, a man in a van was parked across the street. He called to me, asking me if I had seen his dog and could help him find it. Me, being a dumb child, offered to help him find it, and I started walking towards his van. My neighbor, an older white lady, came bolting out of her house hooting and yelling, telling the guy to back off. The dude got back in his car in a hurry and took off, and it wasn't until many years later that I realized how bad that situation could have been. U/slowhockey451 responded. My dad has a client that owns a number of fast food restaurants. One day we were working at one of his stores, remodeling, and talking about robberies. The client told us that when he was just getting into the fast food business, he lived in Colorado. He was assistant manager at a chain that required him to wear a tie. A drug addict came into the restaurant to rob them and grabbed him from behind, putting a knife to his throat. He opened the register and the guy attempted to slit his throat anyway, except the knife was dull and couldn't cut through the material of the tie. The client began to fight back and escaped with minor injuries. Addict went to prison and apparently he has the tie in a frame at home. U/anonymous Defensedged responded. Throwaway because it got some media. I'm a criminal defense attorney. I was representing this guy that had embezzled almost $500,000 from his business partner. He was looking down the barrel at several years in prison, a bunch of his assets had been seized by the government, was being sued by multiple creditors for north of $2 million, and was in the midst of an ugly divorce and wasn't allowed to see his kids. I was one of 3 lawyers he had, criminal, civil, and divorce. He was drinking a lot and using coke. I used to get this incoherent phone calls in the middle of the night that ranged from threats to crying. He came to my office one day and asked for me, but I was in court. My secretary said he was perfectly civil. He then went to his divorce lawyer's office and shot him to death. Got stopped by the police a short distance away and was wounded in a shootout. He would later tell the cops that he had come to my office to shoot me that day and also planned to shoot his civil attorney. U/K_Shan responded. I have a friend who had a party at his parents' house when he was in high school that a ton of random people went to. He got super drunk during the party and went upstairs to go to sleep, knowing that his friends would watch the party for him. My friend woke up from his nap to a guy from his school sitting on top of him stabbing him death. He was stabbed 7 times before it stopped and he laid there on the bed dying. The only reason he is still alive is because his best friend came upstairs to ask him if it was alright if he made a frozen pizza and found him. The assailant was put in jail and recently was released, and it scares me to know that a guy who wanted to know what it would feel like to kill someone, said during the trial, is still out there free. U/LifesLemon91 responded. Our neighbors when I was growing up had 3 kids the same ages as myself and my siblings. We were all friends and got along well for the most part. Their eldest child, I'll call him Peter, has Asperger syndrome and was known to have outbursts that would sometimes be violent. One day, when I was 5 or 6, our mothers decided to take all 6 of us to a nearby wading pool because it was hot out. Well, due to that, it was pretty busy, and there were a lot of other kids. There were 2 lifeguards there, but were generally too busy chatting with each other to be doing their jobs, as my mother later tells me. I was off with my neighbor's daughter, was my age, and Peter. I don't remember why, but he suddenly flew into a fit and decided that I was at fault for something. He, being about 8 and a lot bigger than me, grabs my head and holds it under the water. I remember that. I remember not being able to breathe. I remember clearly thinking that I needed air or I was going to die. I remember fighting, but not being strong enough to get him off of me. Then I remember my mom's face. She had a clear look of both terror and fury. I remember looking over and seeing Peter sitting with his arms around his knees, rocking back and forth as his mother tried to calm him down. Then I remember my mom absolutely losing it on the lifeguards who had missed everything and were clueless as to why this tiny woman was screaming at them that her daughter had almost drowned on their watch. U/Sweetragnarok responded. I jumped out of a moving vehicle. This was in college in a different country. There were commuter buses that takes us to and from the campus and dorms. I had to stay 30 minutes later for a project, so around 7:30 p.m. by then the commuter rush was gone. I was the only passenger and I was sitting at front next to the driver. He was acting already shady. It was dark and rainy. He made a sudden dark turn of a grassy unlit hill. He said something's wrong with the tires. I said him getting off, He won't let me. The hill leads to a cliffside where rapes and murders have happened before. I had the pointy stick of my umbrella facing him ready to jab if he tried anything, which he tried to reach grab for me. I jumped and ran straight to the highway where another commuter bus stopped, surprised seeing a girl coming out of the tall grasses. I saw the driver of my previous ride, speeding away. Nothing was wrong with his tires, Squash responded. I was abducted at a gas station during undergrad. The locks on my car were broken, and as soon as I got back in, a strange man came in and forced me to drive him to an ATM. I am paralyzed with fear, so any sense or reason I had went out the window. He claimed he worked at Wendy's and for my generosity he would give me all the Wendy's I ever wanted. On the way to the ATM he showed me pictures of his daughters, on his clearly stolen cell phone. Then a Whitney Houston song came on the radio and he starts bawling his eyes out and screaming, "Why do all the good people have to die? Only bad things should happen to bad people." I go to the ATM, take out cash, give it to him thinking it's over. He then makes me get back in the car and drive him somewhere else. We pass by some train tracks and I'm thinking this is it. This is where I will be murdered. He asks me what I'm studying in school, and I tell him biochemistry. I believe in jet propulsion and all that shit. We are not alone, aliens are among us. He then makes me pull over at a gas station and he tells me, "Drive away, sweetheart." I call the cops, had to do a lineup. Apparently this dude had done this to a ton of other women, and some were less unscathed than I was. /_Dubitime responded. Mine's not extreme by any chance, but a couple of years ago my brother and I went to walk the dog at like 11 p.m. We left through the side gate, live on a corner, and right as we exit I see this weird looking dude at the corner of the footpath walking weirdly towards us. Got bad vibes and told my brother to get the dog and get back inside. This dude is walking kind of side on and hiding something in his hand behind his back. As I'm getting my brother through the gate the dude says something like, "Oi mate, can I come in? I need a blanket, I'm freezing." I just ignored him and went inside and locked the door. We then get a call from the people who live 2 doors up. The same dude knocked on their door and their 10-year-old son opened it to see the dude holding a fucking hatchet. Anyway, I'm glad I went with my gut on that one. /Staryamdad responded. My supposed best friend decided that my wife and I were too perfect. Therefore it must all be an act and I was obviously abusing her. He was at our house after I made an awesome dinner and we were having fun drinking and singing karaoke. I went to the kitchen to put some glasses away, came back and leaned on the couch with him slightly behind me to the left of me. Then I heard a thunk and felt an amazing amount of pain on the top of my head. He had picked up the whiskey bottle on the table and smashed it into my skull. I was very confused as to WTF was happening. Then the blood started pouring. I didn't want to get blood everywhere, so I went to the kitchen. Dude is pacing back and forth saying weird shit. I thought about my gun, which was close by, but I wasn't thinking quite straight. He left. I had a huge concussion and still suffer side effects from it. My number 2 goal in life is to live longer than that asshat just so I can shit on his grave. /KDog573 responded. Sophomore year of college, went with a friend to go hang out at his old college. We were supposed to crash with a few friends of his, but we met a few ladies and ended up at a pool party. Next day went home and my friend started getting calls from one of his buddies' moms asking if he'd seen him. Turns out in the middle of the night a few guys broke into the house, kidnapped my friend's buddy and roommate, took their car and drove them out to the middle of nowhere and executed them. I guess it was part of some gang initiation. I was supposed to sleep there with my friend. I still sometimes think about it and get the shivers. Edit, spelling. This happened in 1999 in Steubenville, Ohio. Someone posted a link to the wiki page in the comments. Thank you to all the people who commented. I posted this before work and then my phone went crazy for the next few hours. /Greenlightracer responded. I was exiting a bar once after last call and was with a friend who was a medic. We saw a girl laying in a snowbank near a telephone pole who had just been hit by a car. We ran over and tried to help her. Some others were already on the phone with 911 and I, not having any medical training, didn't have anything to contribute but didn't want to just leave. The whole situation was concerning. I turn around for a second and start to hear people screaming. I turn around, a minivan was heading for us, the few people around this woman. They already started to run, but I was too late. He hit me as I was trying to flee, put the car in reverse, ran over me again, and then went forward and run over me a third time. Turns out the guy was high and drunk and got into a fight with the women's BF, whom I bared a strong resemblance to. He thought I was him. Not to throw a pity party for myself, but 9 years later I have a ton of medical issues, and my life pretty much started on a downward spiral since then. But sure, I guess I survived. Edit. For everyone wondering about the guy, an off-duty cop watched the whole thing go down, and copied his license plate number. He was apprehended 20 minutes later and charged with attempted murder, along with many other things. He pleaded out to just 3 years in jail. He had actually killed someone else a few years before drunk driving. How they thought that was appropriate is beyond me. U/Muffinips13 responded. I was 14 and outside in my garage petting my cat. It was November, so it was already dark by 5 p.m. Someone opened the door behind me without me hearing, grabbed me by my ponytail and starting dragging me outside. They hit me on my head with a brick and knocked me out. Pulled me halfway around my house when, I'm guessing this is when, they stabbed me on the left side of my stomach. This must have brought me out of my daze, because my mom said she heard me scream from inside where she and my brother and sister were in the kitchen. They came out the front door and saw me bleeding out on the sidewalk, called 911. Had 12 stitches, double layer, a severe concussion, and whiplash. Didn't eat and hardly slept for a week. They never found them. Edit. Somehow believed for nearly 14 years I was 15 when this happened. Turns out I was 14. Edited to correct. Second edit. Thank you so much for my first gold. U/Harpagist responded. I was riding in a train across Eastern Europe. I was running low on money, and even though I had been warned that a woman should not travel alone in second-class seating, I did not spring for first class. I was sitting alone in one of the compartments that seats 6. This was also a mistake and a very stupid one to sit alone. Eventually the train stopped and a man got on. He was very drunk. He came into my compartment and I guess thought I looked like his ex-wife. He attacked me. If it were not for the fact that this particular station was the border between 2 countries, I would be dead. Instead, border patrol from both countries were on the train, and while I was unable to scream, the door was open and at least a half a dozen uniformed men jumped him and saved me. I was in the hospital for a little while but recovered. At one point during the trial, one of the cops asked me if I wanted him and his buddies to hold the guy down while I hit him. I thought he was joking. So I said no, go ahead, you do it. I was also joking. But it turns out they took it seriously and were about to. I did put a stop to that at least. But they were so offended that someone from their country would attack a young female American tourist. They were furious with him. So many people there depended upon tourism. U/Thelamonks responded. This all happened many years ago. I was a lead man at a factory. A girl starts working there, and I take an interest. After a few months, I find out she is in a terrible drug-fueled abusive relationship. Every night, I tell her to call me, I'll come get her. Finally, after months, she calls me, I come get her and take her to my house. The guy she was in the relationship with didn't take too kindly to me taking her away. He spends the next 2 years harassing and threatening us. A few months after she and I got married, we went out for a few drinks. Her ex just happened to be at the bar we went to. He apologized to us for the threats and harassment. We were sitting outside talking with a few other people. Next thing I know, I'm on my back on the ground with someone choking me. I try all I can to get them off of me, but being blindsided and them being on top of me, it wasn't easy. As I struggle to get free, everything goes black, then I see the light at the end of the tunnel. In that moment I was certain that this was the end of me. I somehow managed to get a better hold of this person's head, and I yank them off of me. We run to the car and get away. A week or so later, my wife had been talking to everyone she thinks might know what happened. Turns out, her ex had paid 2 people $50 to kill me that night. U/Tyronius the Great responded. Well, I don't know if this counts as an attempt or not, but my wife, my kids, and myself went to church one time and we ran into one of my wife's old flings. This guy followed my wife around and our daughter and kept trying to talk to them. So I confronted him about it and told him to back off. As we were leaving, he makes sure to yell across the parking lot telling my daughter goodbye. My wife forces me into the car and we leave. So I'll message the guy on Facebook to ask him what his problem is, and he tells me that my wife and daughter are his friends and I have no right to tell them who to be friends with. I told him again to back off or I would call the police. Fast forward a week, I worked every other Sunday. I get a call from the pastor saying that they had to call the police on the guy because he was causing drama looking for me. When they arrested him, he had a backpack with him that had a sawed-off shotgun, a meth pipe and some meth in it. U/Braxtonianman responded. When I was 2 weeks into my first job as a 16-year-old, at a smoothie establishment that should be known to NBA fans, we were robbed. It was late, and my co-worker's friends had been playing pranks on her all day, so when I saw someone burst through the door, I thought it was just that. Until, That is, I had something metal pressed against my back and an arm wrapped around my chest. The robber gave the whole stereotypical, "Give me all the money" spiel, and ordered us to go into the back room, kneel down, and face the wall. As I was kneeling and hearing him walking towards us, time seemed to slow down. Thankfully, I had been refilling juices whenever he came in, and so the door to the back room was partially blocked by a heavy cart. With whatever substance he was on, he wasn't coordinated enough to get past it to us, so he fled. He was followed by my co-worker's husband and caught. When he was caught, they found an industrial-sized pipe wrench wrapped tightly in his fist, so that he could get a stronger grip when swinging. I'm so glad that cart was there. Once a year or so, I would look him up in the parish prison roster to see if he was still in jail. One year, he suddenly wasn't. I later found him named in a lawsuit as having stabbed his cellmate a half-dozen times while the guy was asleep. Definitely doesn't seem like the nicest of people. 9 years later, I'm still unpacking this incident in therapy. It's why I don't like walking around cities at night or sitting where I can't see the door. U/St Clone Surfer responded. Not sure if this counts, but I was a lifeguard on one of the local beaches. I was out patrolling in the truck by myself and got a call for a medical aid at one of the condos behind the boardwalk. I grab everything and head over. This is fairly unusual, but we do respond from time to stuff off the beach since we're closer and do what we can until medics show up. Knock on the guy's door, identify myself, and then enter residence. It's a younger guy, clearly on drugs, blood around the area of his wrists, and he's just looking at me dumbfounded. As I begin to ask him what the problem is, my supervisor walks in, grabs my shoulder, and basically pulls me out of the condo. Turns out this guy had called in about committing suicide and threatened to kill anyone that entered the residence. Obviously they shouldn't have sent me in there, and it ended up being a pretty big deal with people getting reprimanded for telling me to respond instead of waiting for police. U/needs more tuber responded. In my late teens, I used to buy my weed from random dudes in the projects, low-income housing. One day we gave some money to a guy named 40. He took it and went inside one of the buildings. We waited in the car for several minutes. We started to think he had taken our money and left. Right about that time, a car full of coked-up white dudes pulled up beside ours. Apparently my friend owed them money. They pointed a gun at him and said that if he had enough money to buy weed, then he could pay them back. I really thought they were going to shoot us and just drive off like it was nothing, and I hadn't even done anything wrong. I thought I was gonna pee my pants. Right about that time, 40 came back out with our weed and an even bigger gun. He scared them away, and then we went back to his apartment and smoked a blunt. What a good man. Turns out he was only selling weed because he had a 6-year-old daughter, and that was the only way he knew to give her a better life than he had. I babysat his daughter occasionally for the rest of that summer. I really hope she got a decent childhood and that her dad stayed safe and out of jail. TLDR, almost got shot but was saved by random drug dealer who turned out to be a decent fellow. U/4KUHD9 responded. Walking home from my pregnant GF's house at the time. Honestly, it wasn't a bad neighborhood. Well, I'm walking basically just minding my own business, past these guys, maybe 3 or 4 of them. They were heading the other direction on the other side of the street. Something told me to look back, and right as I did that, one of them had a gun pointed to the back of my head. I turned around fully and was just like, yo. They were like, give us your money, etc. I had a wad of dollars and not sure if it was quick thinking, but I stuck my thumb in between the cash, pulled it out and threw it on the road, and it scattered. As they went to pick it up, I bolted. These assholes chased me. I just run to some dude's house who, luckily for me, he was cool, let me in, closed the door and called the cops. A few weeks later those same dudes were arrested for robbery and killing the person they robbed. These guys were from a neighboring neighborhood. So YA. U/Bluecoms responded. I was 15 to 16, at a party. I went outside on a balcony for a smoke with someone I was talking to, and there was already a guy out there. We chatted as a group, and the friend went back inside. I started chatting with the guy who was already out there, who seemed a little funny. He started talking about how he was in the army for a little bit but got kicked out, then pulled out a big knife and handed it to me. I looked at it and gave it back to him. At that point he pushed me against the edge of the balcony, put the knife to my neck, looked me in the eye, and said, "Do you know why I wanted to join the army? I wanted to fucking kill people, man. People just like you." He then made a slicing sound with his mouth and took the knife away, then started laughing. I went inside, grabbed my GF, and we locked ourselves in a bedroom. He ended up smoking a lot of meth that night and was kneeing holes in the wall and beating on the door. I slept with my knife under my pillow. The next morning he seemed totally normal, except for the fact that he had turned his jeans into short shorts. Fucking scary looking back on it. Edit. Originally put age as 14, but realized later it was closer to 15/16. Also, I found out later that the guy got kicked out in basic training. Surus responded. My sister had this one friend when we were growing up I always got a bad vibe from. She would try to pick on my little brother but I would always stop her. I was 8, she was 10. Once we were at a lake and all the kids were swimming. I swam out to the deep roped off part but I was still little and really shouldn't have. She kept acting weird and getting closer to me making this weird laugh. She pushed me off the wooden pole in the water and I got scared and started to swim back but she came up behind me and pushed me under the water. It didn't click at first that she was trying to drown me but after she aggressively pushed me under the third time I had this crazy moment of clarity. It was like the world slowed down ever so briefly. I relaxed and let myself sink, swam underneath her, and came up behind her. I grabbed her hair and shoved her face into the water, keeping my legs on her back so her body couldn't rise. I waited until her struggling slowed down and let her come up. I waited in the water saying nothing, bracing myself for her retaliation but she just looked panicked and swam back to shore. I told my sister who had already expressed that the girl was weird. We confronted her together and she just looked really dazed. In a monotone voice she said, "I'm sorry, I didn't know it would be like that." It wasn't until I replayed those words in my mind later that I realized what she was saying was, "Sorry I tried to drown you." It wasn't until I was almost drowned myself that I realized how horrible it is to do to someone. Thank you so much for watching all the way to the end. Leave your own stories down below, I would love to read them. If you would like to see more videos like this please like and subscribe, it helps me out greatly.